Hey everybody, it's 9 o'clock and 9 o'clock is with me, Father Warner. We are in the Friday of the fourth week in Advent. In a couple of days, we are going to celebrate Christmas. But for today, our text is taken from Luke chapter 1, verse 57 to 66 in continuation of what we have been doing, the Christmas narrative. And I have entitled today's teaching, A Child That Christmas Forgot. So it is true that the birth of John the Baptist is celebrated on the 24th of June, but look at the build-up to the Christmas narrative, and his birth is just a page before that of Christ. In fact, the Gospel of Luke positions the birth of the precursor, or John the Baptist, as an immediate text before the birth of Christ in chapter 2. The liturgy most deliberately wants us to pause and reflect on the birth of another very significant child before we can ring the bells of Christmas. The birth of John the Baptist was greeted with rejoicing both for the parents and to God who had shown them great mercy. While the Gospel of today mentions the birth of John in just 2 verses, it dedicates the next 8 verses to his circumcision and the events surrounding it. The birth of John was an act of God's mercy and part of his salvific plan. The actions surrounding his circumcision reflect, however, the faith of those who were beneficiaries of this mercy. Elizabeth and Zechariah are presented to us today as models of faith and models of fidelity. God commanded both Abraham and Moses to circumcise male babies when they were 8 days old. You can see this in Genesis chapter 17 and Leviticus chapter 12. John's circumcision, while routine, nevertheless marks Zechariah and Elizabeth as faithful in their observance of the Jewish law. That is to be expected, of course, given the fact that Zechariah is a priest. Now, in the culture of the Israelites, the name of a child was very significant. God sometimes changed the name of a person, such as changing the name of Abraham to Abraham, Sarai to Sarah, and Jacob to Israel. At other times, God gave the name of the child even before the birth, such as in the case of both John and of Jesus. The drama of our text has to do with a family argument over the name which was to be given to the child of Zechariah and Elizabeth. You know, names, as I said, were important in that culture and were supposed to embody something of the importance or the character of the person, or to make some sort of statement or to express some sort of faith. So the naming of a child would normally be a parental function, but these neighbors and relatives tried to influence this naming to honor Zechariah by naming the child after the father. The question which we must bear in mind as we approach our study of this passage is, why would Luke bother to include the account of a family argument over the name of a child? So there are 2 theories. You see, the naming of the son after his father implied that this child would walk in the steps of his father, that he would carry on his father's name and thus his work as well. You see, had John been named Little Zach after his father Zechariah, he would have been expected to grow up as a priest, just like his father. He would thus have gone about with his father as he carried out his priestly duties, learning how to do things just like daddy did them. To be named by any other name would have implied just the opposite. John would then not follow in the footsteps of his father. Yet, there are others who argue that it would be unusual to name a son after his father because sons are usually known by their given name in addition to their father's name, as in Simon, son of Jonah, Matthew chapter 16, verse 17. Now, if Elizabeth were to name the baby Zechariah, he would be known as Zechariah, son of Zechariah. Very awkward phrasing, sounds very odd. Now, these neighbors and relatives are willing to ignore that problem in order to honor Zechariah, probably out of their pity at the fact that he was mute. So, they motion Zechariah as if he is deaf as well as mute. We have no evidence that he is deaf aside from this verse. People often assume that a mute person cannot hear, which is often but not always the case. And that seems to be what is happening with these neighbors here who are indicating to him. Now, one of the first and strongest impressions we gain from these verses is that sense of the prominence of Elizabeth and of her determination for her son to be named John rather than Zacharias. Her actions may well have been considered inappropriate by those who observed her. For Elizabeth to be outspoken and insistent may have even shocked the neighbors as totally out of place for a woman. Nevertheless, Elizabeth did so, and Luke strongly implies that she was both godly and right in doing so. The neighbors and relatives who attended the circumcision had their well-worn expectations about what this child should be named. But they had to learn that it is God who chooses the name, and the destiny of this child was in God's hands. Perhaps with every child, God moves the world in a new direction. Zechariah has been dumb for almost 9 months, but now he can speak, and his first words are a song of praise, which we will hear again in tomorrow's gospel. Everyone recognized that John was going to be an exceptional child. It is clear that Zechariah understands that his son will be the forerunner of the Messiah. Zechariah rejoices because the coming of the Messiah is now so very close. Today, as we draw closer to Christmas, think about your own name and also think about your faith. And thank the Lord for your name, which is written on the palm of his hand. I want to wish my dear friends Gerald and Lila, who live in Melbourne, a very happy anniversary, and joy to all of you as we prepare for Christmas. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to our channel. Yes, and I'm sorry that you have to put up with these noisy people who keep honking outside our church, but that's part of life. I'll see you everybody tomorrow. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve. Put on a big smile, reach out to someone in need, and bring joy to the world.